This is Freshly Squeezed True Crime, a Florida-only true crime podcast. I'm Suhaili, and before we get to this week's juicy episode, I ask you to visit the website at fstcpodcast.com, where you'll find all of our social media platforms as well as the newest episodes. And also, find us on YouTube, where we'd like you to follow us, subscribe, share it, do all the things. So, pour yourself a tall glass of orange juice, and let me tell you a story. Liberty City is a neighborhood in Miami, Florida. The area is roughly bounded by Northwest 79th Street to the north, Northwest 27th Avenue to the west, the Airport Expressway to the south, and the I-95 to the east. The neighborhood is home to one of the largest concentrations of African Americans in South Florida. Although it was often known as the Model City, both historically and by the City of Miami government, residents more commonly called it Liberty City. Once part of the sparsely populated outskirts of northern Miami, what became Liberty City developed during the Great Depression of the 1930s, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the construction of the Liberty Square housing project in 1933, the first of its kind in the southern United States. Built as a response to the deteriorating housing conditions in densely populated and covenant-restricted slums of Overtown. Construction on the initial housing project began in 1934, and it opened in 1937. Into the 1940s and 50s, the growing Liberty City and adjacent Brownsville thrived as a middle-income Black American community, hosting several churches, hospitals, and community centers. The area served as home to prominent figures such as Kelsey Farr, M. Alethea Range, the first Black American elected to serve on the Miami City Commission, and boxer Muhammad Ali. Although segregation laws prohibited Black Americans from resting and residing in popular Miami Beach, service establishments and resorts such as the Hampton House Motel and Villas catered to and entertained the likes of nobles such as Martin Luther King Jr., Alethea Gibson, and even whites such as Mickey Mantle. The construction of the I-95 in Florida in Overtown and the declining use of restrictive covenants in the wake of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 dramatically altered the neighborhood in the 1960s. Increasing numbers of lower-income elderly and welfare-dependent families migrated to Liberty City after the displacement, primarily from inner-city Overtown, turning the area into a dangerous ghetto, leading to large-scale Black flight of middle and high-income Blacks and other Blacks like West Indian Americans, largely to suburban areas like Florida City and Miami Gardens in southern and northern Miami-Dade County, respectively. Crime grew prevalent in the increasing poverty-stricken area in the immediate post-civil rights movement era of the 1960s and 70s. The ensuing problems of the poor and disenfranchised grew most apparent and notable in race riots that occurred in Liberty City in August 1968 during the Republican National Convention in Miami Beach, and in May 1980 following the acquittal of police officers charged with the killing of Arthur McDuffie. The plight of inner-city Black Miamians increasingly came to be highlighted in the national press into the 1980s as the University of Miami Hurricanes football team won several national college football championships led by Black players recruited from Black lower-income neighborhoods such as Liberty City and Overtown. National exposure continued with the popularity of nationally broadcast programs such as the NBC crime drama Miami Vice, which brought the deteriorating conditions of the area to greater prominence. Into the 1990s and 2000s, music grew to reflect the area, with locals such as Luther Campbell of Two Live Crew pioneering the Miami bass genre, which dominated Southern hip-hop during the decade. Other music and sports talents rose to national prominence from the area, such as rappers Trina and Trick Daddy, because Trick loved the kids, and NFL players Chad Ochocinco Johnson, Antonio Brown, and Willis McGee. A cult, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a religion regarded as unorthodox, a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, and finally a system of religious beliefs and ritual. The word cult is derived from the Latin term cultus, which means to worship. In modern English, the term cult is generally a pejorative carrying derogatory connotations. Different types of cults include political cults, doomsday cults, and destructive cults. Groups labeled cults are found around the world. People in a cult generally don't understand that they are even in a cult. If they did, they would likely try to leave. It is often only on the way out or after leaving, that people are able to identify that the group is cultic. New religious movements are relatively new religious or spiritual groups that have emerged, often in tension with established religions and cultural norms. Some examples of the groups most frequently are Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Scientology, and Jehovah's Witness, the Family International, previously the Children of God. Miami's own version of David Koresh and Jim Jones, Yahweh Ben Yahweh was born Hulon Mitchell Sr. on October 27, 1935. The eldest of Hulon Mitchell Sr., the minister of the Church of God in Christ in Enid, Oklahoma, and Pearl Mitchell, a pianist from the same congregation. Raised in small-town Kingfisher, Oklahoma, Yahweh grew up experiencing racial discrimination firsthand in the 1940s and 50s. After leaving Oklahoma, Mitchell joined the military, more specifically the Air Force, and then attended law school. Throughout his life, Yahweh adopted several religious practices, and he claimed he knew he was divine by the age of 3. At 3 years old, I had just found that I could pick my nose. He came to believe African Americans deserved a religion to reflect their own heritage and power gained through the civil rights movement. He studied psychology in college and later earned a master's degree in economics at Atlanta University, where in the 1960s he joined the Nation of Islam and took the name Hulon X. After leaving the Nation of Islam in the late 1960s, he became a faith-healing Christian preacher and named himself Father Mitchell, fashioning himself after Father Divine and Samuel Father Jehovah Morris, two African-American ministers and self-proclaimed divine connections to God who were active during the early 20th century. Mitchell arrived in Miami, Florida in 1978, where he gathered the members of the city's Black Hebrew Israelites congregation and founded the Nation of Yahweh. 1978 was a different time. You had the Jonestown Massacre, Richard Chase, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento, who was caught, Ted Bundy, caught in Pensacola, Florida, John Wayne Gacy was caught, Rodney Alcala, known as a dating game killer, appeared in the dating game in September 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer committed his first murder. The Hillside Stranglers, Angelo Buono Jr. and Kenneth Bianchi, cousins who killed their 10th and final victim. Andre Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov, committed his first murder. The first solo North Pole expedition, the first test tube baby, the first Garfield comic strip, Susan B. Anthony Dollar, Roman Polanski flees to France hours before he was to be formally sentenced for rape and other charges against children. The world population was at 4.4 billion. President Jimmy Carter, the Broncos win the Super Bowl, the Yankees win the World Series, the Bruins win the Stanley Cup. The most popular car was a Chevy Impala or Capri, priced at $5,468, adjusted today for $24,544. The number one movies were Grease, Saturday Night Fever, Animal House, Jaws 2, and Superman. The number one songs were Night Fever, Staying Alive, I Will Survive, and 3 Times a Lady. Popular shows on TV were Happy Days, Little House on the Prairie, Saturday Night Live, and The Muppet Show. Illinois Bell Company introduces the first ever cellular mobile phone system. Space Invaders launches craze for computer video games. 98% of all American homes have a television. The average income per year was $17,000. The average monthly rent was $260. The cost of a gallon of gas was 63 cents, and a carton of eggs was 48 cents. So back to the Nation of Yahweh. Yahweh is the proper name of the Aramaic God, so Yahweh Ben Yahweh literally means God, Son of God. His goal was to move African Americans who it believed are the original Israelites to Israel. The group acceptance of Yahweh Ben Yahweh as a Son of God. In this way, its beliefs are unique and distant from those of other Black Hebrew Israelite groups. He considered himself the architect of the universe. Unrest in the city fueled by anger over the acquittal of 4 white police officers who allegedly beat a black motorist opened the door for his message. The 1980 Miami riots, also called the Arthur McDuffie riots, began on the night of May 17, 1980. The riots continued until May 20th, resulting in at least 18 deaths, while 370 people, some of them children, were hurt, and 787 arrested. Property destruction exceeded $100 million. While researching this case, I went down a deep rabbit hole regarding the Arthur McDuffie case, so please stay tuned for a future episode where I'll cover the case in its entirety. The organization described itself as the following. In 1978, Yahweh Ben Yahweh came to Miami and became the spiritual leader and founder of the Nation of Yahweh. Although he took a vow of poverty, in 7 years he would amass $250 million empire. Under his direction, the nation had grown to encompass disciples, followers, and supporters in over 1,300 cities within the U.S. and 16 other countries. In his teachings, Yahweh told his followers to wear white, claiming, "He that overcometh the white man, the same shall be clothed in white remnant," according to the Miami Herald. Quote, "We are white people's property as long as we keep their name," end quote, was another lesson, leading many followers to assume biblical names, often adopting the surname Israel. He said that he rose from the dead to be Messiah to American members of the Black tribe of Israel. His message was simple: God is black, and black are God's chosen people. This message became a rally cry for some, and by 1981, his congregation had grown to more than 200 followers. Many members of the Nation of Yahweh live communally in a mixed-use complex known as the Temple of Love, located in Miami's historically black enclave of Liberty City. The headquarters was a heavy-guarded former shopping market and food stamp redemption center. Followers were expected to generate money by selling goods, which included Yahweh-branded drinks and beauty products. The branches of the Temple of Love were established in several cities, where they controlled a number of Miami enterprises. The Miami headquarters owned, quote, a fashion boutique, a clothing factory, and a kosher cafe. The temple also produced beer and wines and controlled bottling companies, a fleet of trucks and buses, and a line of hair preparations of which it maintained actually grow your own hair. With these proceeds and donations from members, the group invested in real estate holdings, including 4 motels, bakeries, restaurants, apartment buildings, 3 grocery stores, a school, and a shopping center, which was valued at $9 million in 1990, according to the New York Times. Yahweh gained considerable praise from some conservative white businesses and community leaders, and black community leaders as well, with his, quote, pull yourself up by the own bootstraps gospel, a la Ronald Reagan, end quote. But the early utopian idea faded as the grip tightens. Black Hebrew Israelites, also called Hebrew Israelites, Black Hebrews, Black Israelites, and African Hebrew Israelites, is a religious movement claiming that African Americans are the descendants of the ancient Israelites. Some subgroups believe that Native Americans and Latin Americans are descendants of the Israelites as well. Black Hebrew Israelites combine elements of their teaching from a wide range of sources to varying degrees. Black Hebrews incorporate certain aspects of the religious beliefs and practices of both Christianity and Judaism, though they have created their own interpretations of the Bible, and other influences include Freemasonry and New Thought. For example, many choose to identify as Black Hebrews rather than Jews in order to indicate their claimed historic connections. Black Hebrews are not associated with the mainstream Jewish community, and they do not meet the criteria that are used to identify people as Jewish by the Jewish community. They are also outside the fold of mainstream Christianity. Black Hebrews is a non-homogeneous movement with a number of groups that have varying beliefs and practices. Various sects of Black Hebrews have been criticized by academics for their promotion of historical revisionism. The Black Hebrew movement originated at the end of the 19th century when Frank Cherry and William Crowdy both claimed to have received visions that African Americans are descendants of the Hebrews in the Bible. Cherry established the Church of the Living God, the Pillar Grounds of Truth for All Nations, in 1886, and Crowdy funded the Church of God and Saints of Christ in 1996. Subsequently, Black Hebrew groups were founded in the United States during the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, from Kansas to New York City, by both African American and West Indian immigrants. In the mid-1980s, the number of Black Hebrews in the United States was between 25,000 and 40,000. However, there is criticism. You see, the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the SPLC, has criticized the beliefs of the Nation of Yahweh as racist, stating that the group believes that blacks are the true Israelites and whites are the devils. The SPLC also claims that the group believes that Yahweh Ben Yahweh had a messianic mission to vanquish whites, and that it held views similar to those of the Christian identity movement, which believes that Aryans are the true Israelites and non-whites are devils. The SPLC quotes Tom Messenger of the White Aryan Resistance as saying, "Groups like the Nation of Yahweh are the black counterpart to us." The Anti-Defamation League has criticized the Nation of Yahweh and some other black Hebrew sects, stating, in 1987, the Anti-Defamation League reported on black sects holding these views, arguing that today's Jews are not, quote, the chosen people described in the Bible. Instead, that the label applies to the people of African descent, such as the Yahwehs and the original African Hebrew Israelite nation of Jerusalem. "We may be rabbis and nuns here," he told the New York Times with a wide smile, "but we don't believe in celibacy." Many followers were men. The main elders were men as well. Yahweh Ben Yahweh's wife, Linda Gaines, or as she became known later on, Judith Israel, became a significant helper and leader. Gaines collected money, handled finances, and the possessions of full-time workers. She had a bodyguard and was high up on the following. Though the Nation of Yahweh presented itself as a religious organization dedicated to improving black lives by teaching self-reliance and practicing urban renewal, darker things were going on behind the closed doors of the Temple of Love. Those who questioned Yahweh's teachings or practices within the group were subject to discipline, beatings, and, in some cases, murder. On November 12, 1981, former Nation of Yahweh member Ashton Green was beheaded after leaving the group, according to the Miami Herald. Ricardo Woodside said his brother, defendant John Foster, and other sect members beat Green with a tire iron and their fists in a back room at the temple. Quote, "Any available spot that was open on his body was beaten. He looked horrible. Blood was on the floor and all over his face, and he was moaning and groaning," end quote. Woodside said he stood guard in a remote area west of Miami as Foster and Richard Ingram decapitated Green, who had been taken from the temple, bound, gagged, and wrapped in a carpet in the trunk of Foster's Ford Galaxy, while he was still alive. Yahweh had preached, quote, "The hypocrites must die," Woodside said. Yahweh praised the men for slaying a hypocrite, but chastised them for not leaving Green's car with the body. The men had hidden the car a few miles away from the body. Yahweh told Woodside should have left the car and the body together so the hypocrites could see what Yahweh, quote, God, did. Quote, "He said, when we take the next head, we're going to put the head in a basket and hang it on a post so the whole city can hear Yahweh and fear Yahweh." It should be noted that Yahweh smiled while this testimony was being given in court. When the slaying was finished, Yahweh told Woodside, "There's no reason to be shaken up, because when warriors come back from war, they have a feast, so go get something to eat," end quote. His body would later turn up in the Everglades. When his roommates and fellow defectors, Carlton Carey and Mildred Banks, went to report the incident to the police, they were attacked. The couple told police they feared for their lives and were thinking about buying a gun for protection. Early the next morning, as they arrived home in Carroll City from the police station, two hooded gunmen ambushed the pair. Carey was fatally shot, and Banks was shot and struck with a machete. She survived the attack. Police said the killers apparently intended to decapitate the couple. On September 17, 1983, Leonard Dupree, branded a defector, was attacked in the temple and beaten to death by a crowd of Yahweh members after an altercation with a female Yahweh member. His body was never found. On April 19, 1986, a resident of the Coconut Grove Apartments and neighbor discovered the bodies of Wendell G. Fowler and Kurt Dewar, stabbed to death in bed. On May 22, 1986, the body of Claire Walters was located by the Miami SWAT team in an abandoned motel on Biscayne Boulevard. Her throat had been slashed and her left ear had been amputated. Her ear was missing from the crime scene. On July 21, 1986, a male sex worker found the body of James Lee Myers stabbed to death with a partially severed right ear. On September 5, 1986, Lyle Bellinger was stabbed to death near Biscayne Boulevard. A fisherman found his body in a field. Almost immediately, police suspected religious overtones were involved in his death. Bellinger died of multiple stab wounds to his upper body and torso that exposed his intestines. The indictments say Yahweh member Carl Douglas Perry, also known as Asher Israel, killed Bellinger. Also on September the 5th, 1986, someone stabbed Raymond Kelly to death, severing both of his ears. His body, spectacles still on, was found in his car, parked at the TP Lounge on South Dixie Highway. The left ear was missing. The right ear was found near the car. Yahweh member Robert Roser, whose name you will hear a few more times, confessed to the murder. He testified that the ear was brought back and presented to the sect leader as a symbol of, quote, a confirmed kill. Roser said he and other Yahweh members were ordered to pick a white victim at random to avenge the death of a black man. The victim, quote, just happened to be there, end quote. The sector leader always taught that we keep the law against the devils, the white devils. When they kill one of us, we kill one of them. He teaches that since white people believe that all black people look alike, we believe that all white people look alike. On September 20th, 1986, 4 men, 3 in turbans, approached Cecil Branch's house. A witness testified. The killer stabbed him 25 times, severing the top of his right ear. The ear was missing from the crime scene. The landlord, a cop, found Branch's body bound and gagged in his house. Before the murder, Branch confronted Yahweh members soliciting donations. Witnesses testified. He pushed a Yahweh woman who became hysterical. She wrote down his license tag as other devotees screamed, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. A state prosecutor called them bone crushers, showed up briefly. Later, Branch chased Yahweh women away from his home. Roser pled guilty, and 3 accomplices were not charged at the time. On October 1st, 1986, someone stabbed Harry Briers to death, severing and taking his left ear. A cop exercising his police dog found the body in front of a park bench at Legion Park on Biscayne Boulevard. On October 10, 1986, Reynaldo Echeverria was stabbed to death by Brian K. Lewis, also known as Hewlon Israel. The Dade State Attorney's Office decided not to file charges after Lewis, who was injured during the attack, claimed it was in self-defense. On October 31, 1986, a large contingent of the Nation of Yahweh showed up at a rundown apartment building the group had bought in Opelika, Florida, for $480,000, which is the equivalent of $1.3 million today. Under the auspices of trying to improve the property, members spent that week attempting to forcibly evict residents. Residents Anthony Brown and Rudolph Broussard publicly resisted. One of the victims had criticized the group on TV. Rudy Broussard was lured out of his apartment. He was shot in the head. The killers chased Anthony Brown, forced him to the ground, and shot him as he pled for mercy, witnesses testified. Police arrested former University of California at Berkeley football player and Yahweh follower Robert Roser, who went by the name Nera Israel, and charged him with the murders according to the New York Times. So I had mentioned the name Robert Roser several times. So who was he? Well, he was a 6'3", 240-pound football player drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in the 9th round of the 1979 NFL Draft, 228th overall, from the University of California, Berkeley. A defensive end, Roser played 6 out of 75 games and started for none of them. Roser's professional sports career in the States was derailed by, quote, allegations of drug use and petty crime. Roser briefly moved on to the Canadian Football League, playing for the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and finally signed with the Oakland Raiders, a team for the reputation of collecting misfits, for only 2 weeks. Upon arrest, he told police that he was 404 years old and couldn't remember his life before conversion. For 7 months, the nation supported Roser with a lawyer and public relations campaign. When Roser issued an ultimatum to the church for a different lawyer, he was excommunicated. In March 1988, Roser turned state's evidence in exchange for a 22-year sentence. Roser, who went by the name Nahareen Israel, confessed to 7 murders, 6 on behalf of Yahweh Ben Yahweh. After the murders of Broussard and Brown, the Miami-based Nation of Yahweh was at risk of losing its good name among city leaders, who saw the religious sect as a champion for the poor. When police showed up at the crime scene, a suspect found hiding nearby wore the familiar white turban of the sect's members. Yahweh Ben Yahweh, who built his following with the message of black supremacy, responded by ramping up his signature charm. Yahweh Ben Yahweh launched a public relations campaign. He showed politicians how the group's members bought and cleaned up drug-riddled and dilapidated buildings, a strategy that otherwise helped the secretive sect grow wealth through real estate. The residents regarded them with a great deal of fear, former Assistant U.S. Attorney David DeMayo said. But oddly enough, the political establishment in Miami, I don't think, did regard them with fear because they weren't aware of what was really going on underneath the surface. So over time, they came to accept him as a wonderful member of the community. Followers who moved into a converted warehouse they named the Temple of Love were kept in line by threats of violence. Accounts from former members describe the Temple of Love as a place of strict control, where Yahweh Ben Yahweh regulated aspects of his followers' lives, including diet, sleep schedules, work habits, and even sexual relationships. A core group of the machete-wielding bodyguards assigned to the leader reinforced the danger. At one point, he had every adult male line up in a show of loyalty and drop their pants, and for any who weren't circumcised, the leader circumcised them himself. After a small group questioned his teachings and moved out to start a new temple, he branded them as hypocrites and called for their deaths. He talked about it. He was giving instruction, said former follower Khalil Amani. One of those disgruntled members returned to the temple and demanded to speak to the leader. He was beaten with a hammer, Amani says, and his body and decapitated head were found in the Everglades. Two others who left went to the police and pointed a finger at the nation of Yahweh. They were then attacked in their home. One died, the other recovered and went into the witness protection program, but no criminal charges were brought. Worshippers slept on hard beds with no mattresses and were often limited to only one meal of rice, beans, and water. Women, quote, shared husbands who could have sex only in communal, conjugal rooms with Yahweh's permission. They all worked 18-hour days for no pay in the cult's printing shop, stores, and offices. Followers were sent into the streets in order to collect $10 daily, and if they failed, they faced consequences. Inside the Temple of Love, they were brought into a cafeteria that came to be known as the Room of Understanding. Basically, you were on a concrete floor with a thin layer of carpet, Amani recalls. You were made to kneel, keep your back straight for up to 9 hours. When I was taken there were many people already inside, wailing, crying in pain. If you fell off your knees, the guards would hit you across the head or back with sticks. The pain radiates up your legs, up through the small of your back, all the way up your spine. Within 10 minutes, your knees are on fire. I was smiling internally because I then knew my time was near. I was done. After being sent away to start a temple in another state, Amani returned to find his wife distant, and the leader he'd viewed as a father figure now cold towards him. He later learned that Yahweh Ben Yahweh had been convening a weekly closed-door, quote, midwife class, end quote, where the leader led women in genital examinations along with placing their mouths on another's private area to, quote, give CPR to the unborn child, Amani said. He also invited oral sex on himself. He would ask the women how many of the sisters would mind giving the king a seed. You fucking yuck. Amani says, come to find out, he was having sex with my wife. Yahweh Ben Yahweh's business and charity efforts earned him respect in the community. Then Miami Mayor Xavier Suarez declared Yahweh Ben Yahweh Day on October 7, 1990, a month before Ben Yahweh's indictment. Although Yahweh Ben Yahweh's followers remained devoted to him, he was in trouble with the law by the 1990s. On November 8, 1990, Ben Yahweh was arrested on federal racketeering charges along with 12 of his followers. After a 6-month investigation, a 25-page indictment handed up by a federal grand jury charged the members of the group with 3 counts of racketeering and extortion. The indictment charges 18 specific instances of racketeering that included 14 killings, 2 attempted killings, extortion, and arson. The arson stems from a 1986 incident in which members were accused of firebombing an area in Delray Beach to frighten the community. His deputy, Judith Israel, was arrested leaving an apartment building in Atlanta. Yahweh himself took the stand, introducing himself to the jurors as, quote, Grand Master of the Celestial Lodge, Architect of the Universe, blessed and only potent and founder of the nation of Yahweh, followed by, quote, I have been the Son of God all my life, and I didn't know it. After more than 4 months of testimony from more than 150 witnesses, on May 27, 1992, Yahweh Ben Yahweh was found guilty in connection with the plotting of 14 murders, 2 attempted murders, and arson. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison and fined $20,000. He was not convicted of racketeering, as a jury acquitted him on that charge and was deadlocked on others. He was also acquitted of first-degree murder charges in separate state trial related to the, quote, ear killings. The verdict from the 12-member racially mixed jury came after 5 days of stale deliberations and several notes indicating that the panel was deadlocked and confused over both the charges and the defendant's guilt or innocence. But U.S. District Judge Norman Rutledge Jr. seemed determined not to declare a mistrial. The extortion charge was thrown out, as prosecutors had not presented enough evidence to support the charges. Prosecutor Richard Scruggs told the Associated Press, We are pleased with some of the verdict and disappointed with others. However, the jury has spoken, and we have the utmost respect for their decision. Attorneys Alcee Hastings, Steve Kastner, and others stated, quote, The prosecution has suffered a major blow, and it ain't over yet. They called it a witch hunt and charged the government with misusing federal statutes designed to prosecute organized crime. They put a group of murder cases together, mixed with the volatile teachings of a small religious group, and tried to make a racketeering enterprise out of it, but the jury didn't buy it. At the trial, Khalil Amani, the one with the, quote, distant wife, was the first to testify against him. And after the case stated, looking eye to eye in that courtroom was terrifying, but I knew it had to be done. Robert Rozier was imprisoned outside of Florida under a new name, courtesy of the United States Federal Witness Protection Program. In 1996, after 10 years behind bars, Rozier was paroled with the new identity of Robert Ramses. In 1999, he expressed remorse for his crimes, telling the Associated Press that he had, quote, rebuilt his life in an intense spiritual and intellectual transformation. On February 5, 1999, he was rearrested under his new name, but on January 12, 2001, was returned to prison on a sentence of 25 years to life under California's 3 strikes law, following a check-kiting conviction. His next eligible for parole hearing is January 2028. Ben Yahweh was released on parole in 2001 and returned to Miami, but his activities were restricted until a few months before his death. He was prohibited from reconnecting with his old congregation. To ensure this, he was restricted from any form of speech by internet, telephone, computer, radio, or television that could place him in contact with any Nation of Yahweh members. In 2006, as he became increasingly ill with prostate cancer, Jane Weintraub, Ben Yahweh's attorney, petitioned the U.S. District Court for his release from parole to permit him to, quote, die with dignity. He died on May 7, 2007, at the age of 71. The location was not disclosed. Quote, Yahweh will be remembered and mourned by the millions of people that he touched through prayer and teachings, his lawyers Jane Weintraub and Steve Poleski said in a joint statement. On the Nation of Yahweh's website, it states the following. On Monday, May 7, 2007, at 7:55 p.m., our founder and Savior completed his first journey on earth and ascended to stand with his Father in the heavens. Yahweh teaches his disciples and followers to practice charity and benevolence, to protect chastity, to respect the ties of blood and friendship, to adopt the principles and revere the law of Yahweh, to assist the feeble, guide and open the eyes of the blind, heal the ears of the deaf, raise up the oppressed and downtrodden, shelter the widow and the orphan, guard the altar of Yahweh, support the government of Yahweh, inclinate mortality, promote learning, love moral men, fear Yahweh, implore his mercy, work for happiness, and be industrious. So was the Nation of Yahweh a cult, or was it a religious movement? Key characteristics associated with the cult include authoritarian control, charismatic leadership to include unquestioning faith, isolation, manipulation, and finally violence with extremism. While some groups labeled as cults may not be involved in criminal behavior, the Nation of Yahweh's history of violence and extremist ideology aligns with the common understanding of a destructive cult. While the Nation of Yahweh began as an offshoot of the Black Hebrew movement, which can be considered a new religious movement, its practices and leaders' actions crossed the line into occultish behavior and criminal activities, leading into a negative classification. It's Freshly Squeezed True Crime. Thank you. You can find us on fstcpodcast.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. This episode was squeezed to perfection. Goodbye.